This is CBC Vancouver News.
Unless you can immediately bolster the physician availability in that emergency department to see the volume coming in, it doesn't make sense to continue to keep the doors open.
Another stark warning from Surrey Memorial Hospital staff: fill vacant posts or shut the ER to new patients.
You've got a family and friends of Madison after 12 years, and you've had hope, I'm sure, and to see that now extinguished has to be devastating.
We take you to the spot where Madison Scotts was last seen 12 years ago in northern BC after police announced they've found her remains.
I think it's just showing that Indigenous people can do lots of different things.
And Indigenous golfers from across BC tee off in a first-of-its-kind tournament. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Staff at one of BC's busiest hospitals have issued another stark warning to health officials and the public: fill vacant posts at Surrey Memorial Hospital or close the ER to new patients. That warning, in a letter, was sent 2 weeks ago. And as John Hernandez reports, it prompted alarm bells and a meeting between doctors and politicians.
The standard of care can no longer be maintained, and that needs to be communicated to the general public at large.
Dr. Rupjit Callan says Surrey Memorial Hospital is on the brink. A letter penned by the Medical Staff Association says there's a clear lack of physicians available to care for patients, leading to a rise in preventable deaths inside overcrowded and understaffed ERs. With staff increasingly stretched thin, they say it's time to start diverting patients away from Surrey Memorial.
Unless you can immediately bolster the physician availability in that emergency department to see the volume coming in, it doesn't make sense to continue to keep the doors open.
The letter was sent to Health Minister Adrian Dix and Fraser Health CEO Victoria Lee 2 weeks ago. Over that time, ER doctors and OBGYNs have made their frustrations and anguish public, writing letters of their own.
I'd rather speak out before the bad outcomes happen.
Bad outcomes, including the recent death of a newborn they say could have been prevented.
When I see how many patients we have and what our resources are, I often wonder, how is this going to work? You know, we have all these patients in labor at the same time.
We have now reached the tipping point.
Surrey's mayor was among politicians and doctors called to a critical brainstorming summit this morning, held behind closed doors, to solve the problem that's seemingly getting worse by the day.
And I've seen bed after bed after bed in hallways. Family members trying to keep the dignity of their loved one.
A problem both leaders and health workers say has been mounting for years, as one of the fastest growing regions in the province hasn't seen matching investments in healthcare.
This is a result of chronic underfunding of the population and the health needs of the region south of the Fraser.
The health minister has since responded.
Fraser Health has got the bulk of our effort since 2017, just as they got the bulk of the neglect prior to 2017.
Summit organizers will file a report outlining possible solutions, but until those become a reality, healthcare workers have pledged to keep up the pressure. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Still with healthcare, while BC has started sending some cancer patients to Washington State for radiation treatment, many were already choosing to pay out of their own pockets because of the lengthy wait times here. As Yvette Bren shows us, those patients are happier with their treatment, but long for the day they won't have to leave home to get it.
Leah Roundtree is trying to stay as healthy as she can after a recent breast cancer diagnosis.
My doctor calls and says there's a lump, and she said, so immediately I'm thinking, okay, I had an uneasy feeling. My mom had breast cancer. This is not a good thing. When can I get a biopsy? She says you can get a biopsy June 28th, which is nearly 3 months from that point. And I thought, 3 months? Like, I can't wait for 3 months.
She opted to skip the wait for tests and pay thousands for private scans, including an MRI in Los Angeles that revealed her situation was much worse than she thought.
So now all the alarm bells are ringing.
Alarm bells about BC's cancer care have been ringing for a while.
It's heartbreakingly bad The situation was bad in the fall, and the situation is now critical.
She says BC's new 10-year plan to fix the system ignores diagnosis waits.
We must do more, we must do it now, and we are.
There are plans to open 2 new cancer centers and send thousands of patients to Washington State for radiation treatments. Since 2019, fewer and fewer people are getting timely radiation treatment in BC. It's one of 3 provinces below the national average.
It's a pretty damning comment on the current state of affairs of our healthcare system that we've had to resort to sending patients to another country for their treatment.
But people aren't being sent south for diagnosis, and with cancer, early diagnosis is crucial.
I'm still feeling incredibly unsettled by how unlucky I could have been.
Her push for private testing kickstarted her care.
So I went from having a clear mammogram to now having stage 3 breast cancer. And as my oncologist here in Vancouver said, we're going to throw everything at you. Chemo, surgery, radiation, pills for at least 10 years, to try and save your life. But this is not a slam dunk.
But she hopes she's now got a better shot. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
People in the small BC town of Vanderhoof are shaken after police announced they've found the remains of a young woman who vanished 12 years ago. 20-year-old Madison Scotts went missing from a remote campsite, but the search for her has continued ever since. Our Betsy Trumpeter went to the spot Scott was last seen alive.
A flag is raised at half-mast at Vanderhoof City Hall, marking a somber day that confirmed the worst outcome to a 12-year-long mystery. Madison Scotts, the vibrant 20-year-old who vanished without a trace at a remote campsite in 2011, now confirmed dead.
It's been 12 long years, and it's comforting in some ways to know, but obviously thinking of Maddie and missing that part of our community.
Yesterday, RCMP revealed a major breakthrough in the case, announcing they found Scott's remains. They won't say where or how, but they say they have a search warrant on a rural property west of Prince George.
Maddie's truck and tent were in this location here.
This campsite was where Maddie Scott was last seen in May 2011. She was celebrating a friend's birthday at Hogsback Lake when she disappeared, leaving her tent and her pickup truck behind.
There was a lot of stress in that first week, 10 days.
Chris Mushamansky was one of the first search and rescue volunteers called to look for Maddie Scott. Revisiting the site where she was last seen brought up memories of toiling for her search.
You've got a family and friends of Madison after 12 years, and you've had hope, and to see that now extinguished has to be devastating.
Mushamansky hopes justice will be served for Scott, as well as many other women still missing in northern BC. RCMP continue to search a rural property they say is associated with her remains. They're asking for tips from the public. But the latest development in Scott's case has ignited more questions.
There has been so much tragedy and grief in this community, but today Hogsback Lake is a place of peace as the community waits for answers that will crack this case. Betsy Trumpeter, CBC News at Hogsback Lake near Vanderhoof, BC.
RCMP and Duncan are investigating a sexual assault that happened 2 weeks ago. They say a woman was attacked while walking on a trail between Macadam Park and Zuhalem Trunk Road on the night of May 16th. They now want to speak with 2 men they say may have more information. Police say the men were seen in the video surveillance they gathered. This is one image. They are not considered suspects. One was wearing a black T-shirt and gray shorts and helped the victim. The other seen here was wearing a blue tank top and black shorts and appeared to be near the Co-op gas station along the Trans-Canada Highway. The alleged assault took place just a day after 15-year-old Carson Seaweed was found about 2 kilometers away. She later died. Mounties say so far the 2 events do not appear connected. A wildfire just west of Saybird on Vancouver Island is affecting air quality across the island. The Newcastle Creek fire was reported yesterday and has grown to about 90 hectares. It's not threatening homes or other buildings right now. Seward's mayor says they are keeping an eye on it, though. The air quality in the Comox Valley, Nanaimo, and Duncan are all affected. A waterfront road in downtown Vancouver will now also be known as Komogata Maru Place. It's to commemorate the 1914 event that saw almost 400 British subjects from India stopped from entering Vancouver. The descendants of those passengers say the honorary name for Canada Place Road is a serious and significant milestone.
My grandfather will be really happy today that their grandson and our society has done something, which my grandfather went back. The ship was returned. He told me, and when that ship was returned, then at Bajbaj Ghat in 1914 in August, they've opened fire. British police opened fire, killing 19 of the passengers and wounding many other passengers. And my grandfather was sent to 5 years in prison along with the others, just for coming to Canada. They were sent back to prison as a political prisoners or something.
Father was in that ship, and I was the one who gave a request March 16, 2018 to City of Vancouver Council to recognize the Komogata Maru passengers. So then City Council told me that you should talk to the staff now and find a street name. So it took me 5 years to bring this street name to the Komogata Maru.
It was important that we named the street, and I love the fact that it's going to be at Canada Place, because when you look at Canada Place, there are literally millions of people that go on that road every single year, and we can celebrate the history of the Komogata Maru in the sense that we can actually tell the true story of what actually happened, and we can educate people, and it goes a long way in celebrating the community.
As tourist icons go, Stanley Park is top of the heap in Metro Vancouver, if not BC. From beaches to glorious forest and the otters of the aquarium, there's a lot to take in there. But there is one place that's been left alone for years. As Justin McElroy reports, what was once a home for bears could be the site of another dip.
For decades, this was one of the strangest sights in Stanley Park. 4 polar bears brought to Vancouver in 1962, part of the park's zoo. As attitudes towards animals in captivity changed, it was shut down. But the enclosure remains, empty since then, littered with garbage and graffiti to the confusion of tourists.
Yeah, it was sad to be empty like that instead of having something.
Use it for something.
And now a local architect firm is proposing just that.
So we're imagining going into a wood-fired sauna on the far side and then coming out into a cold plunge here in the same place where your parents might have seen a polar bear diving.
Osborne's firm has put forward a detailed design for a Nordic-style sauna with different pools, a steam room, and underground areas to relax. On the surface, it might seem like a stretch, but Osborne says it's meant to be a conversation starter.
Vancouver is all too familiar with the experience of having structures demolished and just replaced with something brand new. I think it's much more interesting and a much better cultural practice to retain some sense of history in the past and to integrate what's new into that.
The structure is under the Vancouver Park Board's control, and its chair isn't chilly to the conversation.
I would love to see this come forward as a serious proposal to the board. I always want to see areas where we can reimagine, repurpose, and provide more services for people that come and enjoy our parks and our recreational services.
Still, Jensen says there are more than a few question marks. The cost is a big one, but so too is the Park Board's commitment to make any changes to Stanley Park in consultation with local First Nations, who have a history with the site that long precedes the polar bears.
That would be step one into ensuring that the respect for Stanley Park is maintained in any sort of moving forward collaboration.
The one thing that is for certain is that eventually the Park Board will have to decide what to do with this land that has sat vacant for more than 25 years. So the question becomes whether a sauna is the thing they want to take the plunge for. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
From spas to cheese now, naturally. If you know anything about Gloucester, England, it may be the Cooper's Hill Cheese Rolling Race. And this year's winner is from Nanaimo. We spoke with Delaney Irving after she made Gouda.
Basically, we all line up at the start of this very steep hill. A big 7-pound block of cheese is rolled down, and then everyone just runs after it, trying to catch it. Some people say it is to catch the cheese, but it's almost impossible to catch the cheese. It's so fast. So it's the first person to pass the finish line. I had gotten back on my feet at the very bottom of the hill. I saw I was very close to the line, so I started just sprinting. And then I guess I took a tumble, fell on my head, I got a few scrapes. And when I woke up, it was a few minutes later, I was in the medical tent. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but I found the block of cheese was on my lap, and that's how I knew I had won. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for it. My only strategy going in was, as soon as I felt myself fall, just try to tuck up and try to protect myself, not break anything. Definitely sore. I've got a lot of bruises, but overall, I'm okay.
The South Okanagan is hosting BC's very first Indigenous golf tournament. We're going to take you to the greens after this. And hello and thank you to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. A Ukrainian woman living in Winnipeg recently took an emotional journey home. She left Ukraine with her son after Russia invaded, but her husband stayed to defend his country. He was killed earlier this month. She returned to learn more about the circumstances of his death and find his body.
35-year-old Andriy Sidorchenko's widow says his ability to smile in a war zone is reflective of his personality. Outside Winnipeg's airport, before beginning a long journey back to Ukraine, Hannah Sidorchenko says her husband stayed positive despite the dangers around him.
He was always telling that he was a very positive person, and what he was telling is that he will return and they will live together here.
Hannah spoke Friday through translator and friend Oksana Lazarenko. Through close relatives of one of Andriy's friends and fellow soldiers, she found out May 5th he died in a battle in the eastern city of Bakhmut. Now she's returning to Ukraine with Lazarenko to learn more about the circumstances of his death and find his body.
She needs to find strength in herself. It's pretty hard.
Hannah says she's heard 2 other soldiers were killed in the same battle and 2 were injured. Andriy was serving as a drone operator. His role was to check battlefields for Russian enemies to minimize losses to the Ukrainian armed forces. Like so many others, he gave up his job, which was in construction, to serve. Hannah and their son Rostislav moved to Poland before coming to Canada. Andriy wanted to come to Canada before Russia invaded, but once the war started, he had to stay and help defend his home country. Hannah says Andriy was collecting pictures of Canada. He worked as a welder and wanted to ply his trade here. It's her hope she can find his body.
It was his dream to come to Canada.
They plan to stay in Kyiv and work with lawyers, volunteers, and people on the front lines. The congregation of Soul Sanctuary Church paid for Hannah's flight. She wants to give her husband a funeral and then bring his ashes back to the country he had hoped to call home. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Indigenous golfers from across our province are teeing off on the South Okanagan for a first-of-its-kind tournament. The inaugural BC Indigenous Golf Championship is swinging into action this week, and as Brady Strachan shows us, young players are trying to write a new chapter for Indigenous sport.
Here you go. That works.
For Maya Smith, each swing of the club today is more than just a play for the green. With each stroke, Smith and other players here are writing a new narrative for Indigenous sport in a game that hasn't always been the emblem of inclusivity.
Interesting because we've never had something like this happen before. So I think it's just showing that Indigenous people can do lots of different things and that we're not just these people that are just sitting in our homes watching TV and doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing.
Beneath the clear blue sky at the Incomeep Canyon Golf Course, Smith and more than 100 other players are swinging for more than just birdies and eagles. They're expressing pride in their heritage on the land of their ancestors at BC's Indigenous Golf Championship. BC Golf, the Lieutenant Governor's Office, and the Asuyus Indian Band are hosting the inaugural tournament as a way to promote Indigenous engagement in golf.
Golf traditionally has been a fairly elitist sport, and the doors have been closed to many for a number of reasons. And if you're an Indigenous person, that creates a few more layers of barrier. So to have us all gathering together as a group, doing this and engaging as well with Indigenous and non-Indigenous to make this happen, and having the support of a number of non-Indigenous leaders, to me that's reconciliation.
Golfers from more than 80 communities are playing in the tournament. Proto says introducing the game to more Indigenous youth is the ultimate goal.
One of the best ways to grow the game at the youth grassroots level is to have a competition of this level on a provincial stature where we can showcase some of our best players.
That's not lost on 16-year-old Brody Brook from Prince George. Today, he's swinging for a qualifying score on this course to be able to compete in the National Indigenous Golf Championship this fall.
Great way to show the world what we are, and it's great getting to travel across the country and see lots of different places and meet different people. Should be good.
For Brook, that means drawing on his heritage and experience to bring his best game.
Focus. A lot of focus. I just need to stay focused and not drift out into the unknown.
As he and other golfers here shoot for par on the fairways, they're not just swinging for a trophy, but for their place in the evolving narrative of Indigenous golf. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Oliver.
There's a live look tonight at the White Rock Pier. Not too busy, though. Johanna will have your BC-wide forecast right after this.
Back in 1957, the Vancouver Zoo was the star attraction in Stanley Park. Its displays were considered among the world's best. Thousands of visitors could be expected nearly every weekend. Now, the aquarium is the star. The zoo is out of date, tired, and run down. There hasn't been a major improvement in 30 years. The polar bear pit is 2 decades behind the time. The monkey cages, even worse. Zoo employees say they're surprised the monkeys still breed, considering the conditions. Curators admit changes are needed, and plans are in the works to give the zoo a $1 million facelift. The details won't be revealed until the end of November, after the civic elections on the 17th. But Maverick Parks Board Commissioner Jim Harvey warns the plan is now in jeopardy.
Look at this. It's a disgrace.
He contends the aquarium expansion, which he vehemently opposes, will mean the end of a new, improved zoo.
Now, suddenly to push this aquarium project into the middle of it, thus forcing everything to pivot around it, to me is a great tragedy, because the whole thing had to be laid out. You know what it's like in your house. If you put your chest field in one place, everything else goes out of whack.
But not all of the Vancouver Parks Board commissioners agree with Harvey's doom and gloom prediction. They say the aquarium expansion will not hurt the zoo.
Well, I think perhaps maybe he's a little hard up for issues because I can't see any logistical tie-in whatsoever. If he's referring to the initial expansion plan, which we did look at, perhaps there might have been, but at this particular stage of the plans, there's no way that it even comes anywhere near the land that we're talking about for the zoo.
Mr. Ashford has his own taste. I'd rather him stick with it. In actual fact, there's a sense that you either understand what Stanley Park is about or you don't. I've listened to him for 2 years, and frankly, he doesn't understand it. You know, and you can't teach somebody to love a park.
If a new set of Parks Board commissioners are elected November 17th, expansion plans for both the Vancouver Aquarium and the zoo could change drastically. Eric Rankin, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On June 13th, join CBC's Rudy Kelly at the Alumni UBC's free webinar with Dr. Jeanette Armstrong on revitalizing Indigenous language. Register at alumni.ubc.ca and register for the CBC's Indigenous Pathways to Journalism program. This paid 9-month learning and development opportunity supports Indigenous candidates to hone their skills as storytellers. Learn more at cbc.ca/pathways.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Our BC-wide weather forecast now with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. All you needed was a light jacket on the south coast today, Joe, and you were all set. Made in the shade.
Yes.
But then it would get cold in the shade, you'd put on the jacket.
That's exactly. You could tie it around your waist when you're in the sun.
Wow.
Yes, we
Tell us more about 1995.
Exactly. Throw it over your shoulders and your back in the 80s. We do weather and fashion here.
Well, a valiant attempt at one of them.
A valiant attempt. Yes, but you know what? It was the first time in a couple days that we did need that light jacket, that said jacket. Temperatures getting down to the high single digits with that marine air in place. Let me show you the highs that we hit, recovering nicely across the south coast. Back to seasonal, and it really, you know, the fact that we all noted today was cooler, even though we were hitting 18 at YVR, 18 over towards Victoria, when most of May has been above seasonal. You know, really a reminder of how much warmer than normal it has been, hitting the high 20s across the interior. Now, high pressure will remain in place across the south coast, but there is a system bringing showers to central BC tonight, and we saw some thunderstorms in the northwest. That's thanks to an Alaskan low that will continue to sink south. So we also had some showers in Port Hardy. We may see those again across the island. I don't think getting down to the bottom half of the island, but this is what may bring us a few more clouds to the mix across the south coast tomorrow, and scattered showers for your Wednesday. By Thursday, though, high pressure begins to build back in. That's going to keep that Alaskan low off the coast, and it's going to bring our temperatures back up as we head into Wednesday and Thursday, still hitting that seasonal mark. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday that we'll really begin to feel that heat. Just a 25 for places like Kelowna tomorrow. But as you can see with Vancouver's forecast, check this out. By the time we hit the weekend, could be feeling like the mid-20s, and early next week, Dan, wouldn't be surprised if we see some heat warnings. So we'll keep our eye on the fire danger.
We're checking that out. Hopefully
Big time.
In the shade.
Without a light jacket.
Look at all kinds of options. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
That's your late news for Tuesday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Good night.